Welcome to AI in Motion, the podcast for leaders under pressure to do AI without breaking their teams, their brand, or their judgment. Hosted by Carol-Lyn Jardine, Esma Stewart, and Megan Ratcliffe, co-founders of Clarity in Motion Collective, and operators building and leading with AI in the real world. Each episode brings you conversations with operators, CMOs, and builders navigating AI where it actually counts, inside real workflows, real organizations, and real constraints. What's working, what's not, and what it really takes to move from experimentation to impact. This is AI in Motion.
I wanted to pop in and give you a proper introduction to Baylee Jost. She and I were mid-chat the other day when we launched into our podcast conversation. Baylee is one of the most strategic content people I've had the chance to work with, and her AI transformation has inspired me. Baylee was on my team at Dice, and I had a front row seat to watch how she evolved her mindset and her approach in the age of AI. I'm excited that she's agreed to share her story with you, and I know that her authenticity and her love of her craft will inspire you.
Okay, so Bailey, I would love to hear a little bit about kind of your early introduction to AI. Do you remember the first time you were exposed to one of the AI tools and kind of what you felt like, what you
Sure.
did with it?
So actually the first time that anybody even brought it up to me as a possibility was I was in a job interview in 2022. And this was like probably September or so for context, ChatGPT released their first public model at the end of 2022. So this was
Mhm.
probably 4 months before that. And someone said, do you use AI to write your blog posts? And my reaction was like, of course not. Like I write my own blog posts. Like don't don't assume that. I don't know. I was kind of offended because I work really hard on that content and I was proud of it. And the whole concept just kind of like hit me like a wall. Like, what is even happening? And then when ChatGPT came out, I was an early, I'm a tinkerer. And I was like, of course, I'm going to figure out what this thing is. And I was 100% one of those people who was like, turn this blog post into a Shakespearean sonnet. Like that was very much something I was doing. It was a toy at that point. I think the first time that it was useful to me though was when I was using it for press releases. Press releases are already very formulaic, very boring, very corporate speak. Like there is a way to do a press release and there is no good business reason to deviate from that and add personality to something like that. And so that is where AI is at this even today, still it's gold standard. Like it is really good at something that has a process and a formula and a step, a step, a step. That was the first thing I used it for. And I was more or less sold at that point. It did take me a long time. That was probably midsummer 2023. Between there and where I'm at now, where I'm using AI for all aspects of my role, I'm using it very creatively to figure out new processes and get something out of content and brand that I haven't already tried. There's a long journey between those 2 points, but I will say, like, if you are if anybody is looking for a way to test AI and to start getting comfortable with it, start with the thing that you know really, really well, like something that you trust yourself to know really, really well and know if it's quality, but also consider starting with something that is don't give it something that you know it's going to fail in, basically. Give it something that you know it's good at already, because then that'll help you build from there what you can actually do to work it into your process. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I love that suggestion of starting with something you already can recognize the quality of. I do think a lot of people start in AI and they're like, oh, this looks good. But they're not necessarily starting from a place of expertise where they're really highly critical of what the output is. So they're, looking at it to say, it's kind of mediocre. And how do I need to work with the AI to get it to be higher quality or something that's acceptable? And starting at something that you already know how to judge the quality of is a really good suggestion. If you're thinking about that journey, Bailey, of, all the way from feeling like it was sort of like a toy to what you just described as kind of your strategy and thinking partner. Along your journey between here and there, can you think of any like aha moments where you were like, this is what this is going to be that might be helpful for people to hear about?
Yeah, I mean, the journey for me has been very much of a roller coaster. Like at one point I was, no, I hate this thing. Somewhere in between, like press release, I've been using AI to create something super formulaic. I was still using it at that point for those things as like an early draft for other things like social media posts and blogs. But I was forced into it because, well, I'll share that the first time that I used AI for a really important piece of content was um my one of my coworkers was out on parental leave, and I had to shoulder a workload that I just was not able to handle in my regular 9 to 5. And so what I would have already been doing, like, which was just working hard to just get stuff done and working late hours. Like, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to set up. I was new to a role. I didn't want to set up a precedent that was going to be unhealthy for me later on. And so I was just kind of struggling with that resistance. And that's when I was like, okay, like I've been encouraged to do this. Like, let's just bring this in and just try and figure out what it can do. I will say at that point, I don't know how much time it saved me because I just didn't know how to use it. Um, but it saved me enough time, or at the very least, it was promising enough at that point for me to keep trying. And then from there, I would say it was probably like 6 months of just trial and error. Sometimes me just being like, I want to throw my laptop out the window, like this thing sucks. But ultimately, what it came down to for me was I've been doing this wrong. I've been doing this wrong. I haven't been giving it enough context. I haven't been giving it enough information. My prompts aren't complex enough. Gemini was my first kind of breakthrough tool. I was using Gemini to create early drafts for a big report. It was messing up the data, but I just was eventually I was like, maybe I could just use it to check my work too. So check its own work. And that was like the first time I was like, okay, so like I don't have to just get all of it done in one prompt. Like I can do it in several different pieces and chunk it together that way. At this point today, I'm still using it like that of like, what's the very first step that I would do if I was doing this by myself? Can AI do that? Yes, no, try it, you know? And it's just kind of like, it's kind of like almost like if you envision like what do you call those things? Like a map where you're like, yes, no. Like that's kind of what I do. I come to a task and I say, is this something AI can even help with? Usually the answer is yes. And then I'd say, okay, we're going to break it down into these tiny little pieces. And then I'll say my last breakthrough was probably only a couple months ago. I was reading an article on Substack. Unfortunately, I didn't write it down, so I can't tell you what it is to cite it. But there was a line in there where the guy said basically, if you're worried about AI replacing your job, try and have it replace your job. Like the best thing you can do for your future career is to teach it how to do your job. Because then at the very least, well, you have seen what it's capable of. You will have been coming to it from an expert point of view of, I know how to do this. Can this thing do this? You will, and then also in that process, learn how to use this tool that is, yes, maybe potentially going to replace your job or enhance your job, whatever that looks like in the future. I don't think anyone really knows. Just give it everything you have, like give it all you've got, and you will learn so much and you will improve your processes so much. And that's kind of the place I'm at right now is like, okay, if I can have AI do this for me, then I don't have to do it. And I can turn to any of the other 25 things that I also have to do. And maybe I'll get done a little bit earlier. So yeah.
That process that you just described and your willingness to be kind of jolted by a challenge and then lean into that challenge and be like, okay, let's see what happens. Like number one, I commend you on being fearless in that because it's not an easy thing to do. The follow-up question I have for you is how has your job changed since you decided to see if AI could replace your job? Like what have you learned?
That's a really great question. I think I'm probably just holding more in it. One of the things that I've learned, I mean, knowing that AI is all about context and information and using AI to give itself its own context or having a chat over here that says, this is too much information. Can you summarize this? And then putting it somewhere else. Like just realizing that the information that I hold in my brain can be placed elsewhere and then potentially formalized into a new process or a new piece of content has like really changed the game for me. It's like, I'm just not relying on my own brain anymore for every little piece of it, or even my notes, finding things in my notes, always a horrifying, harrowing experience. So like I can store it somewhere that has some level of its own ability to find information and turn it into something else. That has like really been huge. I use all the tools. I use Claude for writing. I use Gemini if I have a question. I use ChatGPT for really process-based things. If I want to have, like, for example, I have a copywriter there that's only edits for AP style, and then it outputs the various pieces that I need to upload it in as a blog post. So I put in a Word document, it makes the edits that I need, and then it creates a meta description, and then it creates title suggestions, and then it creates social media posts. And all I have to do is put in the article, and all of that just happens within 5 minutes. And then of course, I almost always make changes, but it's like, okay, everything that I'm potentially going to have an output here is like ready for me to see now. Another one that I really love is Notebook LM. Notebook, I use it because AI lies, but Notebook LM can't lie because it is separated from the internet. It only looks at what you give it. So you can give it 200 articles and all of them are based on a topic. And if you want to quickly just understand something about that topic, you can use it. For example, in my role, I've recently taken on responsibility for creating content for tech professionals, specifically expert tech professionals in fields that I probably don't even know exist. Creating content for a group like that, a very meticulous, careful, highly expert group that is going to dislike the brand if I say something that is incorrect. I mean, it feels like a huge amount of pressure, but then if I put it somewhere that can surface information for me, like what does a cybersecurity professional care about in this context? It can surface that information for me and give me a place to start because I wouldn't even know where to go. That was a long answer to your question, but
No, it's all so good. And one of the things I've been loving about Notebook LM is actually going back and thinking about my childhood. I remember being in elementary school and how excited I was when my mom bought a full set of encyclopedias. And just having that much knowledge at our fingertips in our house was mind blowing. I mean, I was pretty young, probably like first, second grade. That feeling is very similar to the first one that I had when I did my first Notebook LM project, where I was like, okay, I've got 7 or 8 really long, complex documents that I'm trying to find kind of the connections between and some of the themes and figure out how to leverage these different sources in helping people understand a complex topic and putting that all into Notebook LM and then being able to kind of surface those insights so readily and effectively. It felt like that time when I picked up an encyclopedia and for the first time understood what the Galapagos Islands were. It was just like that really fun, like knowledge moment where I felt like, oh, this is going to change my life. It was really cool. So I love hearing your hands on experience there too.
yeah, I mean, and the other thing is that Notebook LM can be just like a way to just make sure, like, if you feel confident about something, but not quite confident enough, you can just go back and check your work. I've also used it for brand alignment. I'm also responsible for making sure that the messages of the brand come through in a consistent way. I'm kind of reordering what that looks like at this point in time. So taking all the brand documents that we've had over the course of the last 6 years in various different places, putting them somewhere where that thing can look at it and identify discrepancies and similarities and pull forward some ways to identify where those changes might need to be made has saved me so much time. I don't know how, honestly, at this point, I don't even know what I would have done before, but something like Notebook LM, because it's so much better than me reading something and leaving comments on a Word document. So
Yeah, it's really impressive, like how it can expand your capability to get a thing done, right? I love all these examples you're sharing and kind of the shift in your own mindset, right? Going from it's just a toy to this tool that you're using to both give you more capacity as well as more thinking room, and then to have a partner that you can test your work against. I think that's a really great, interesting evolution of kind of your relationship with AI. I would love to dive into some of your best practices because you've already shared several. One of the things that I would love to understand from you is like, what have you learned about prompting over the last, 3 or 4 months? Because, I think back to the way that I was prompting AI Gosh, it's been about a year since I did my very first kind of real in-depth work with Claude, is where I started. And the way I'm prompting today is much different than the way I was a year ago. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, I think my rule of thumb is there's no amount of context that's not relevant. It kind of depends on what you're doing. So if you're in a state of strategy, there's no amount of context that is irrelevant. If you're creating a piece of content, it will potentially use any context you give it in that final content. So if you don't want that to end up in your content, don't put it in there. So just kind of, I would say, like, I would kind of block it out there, like, of sort of like, what I'm the gatekeeper of what comes out of it. What would I not let pass the gate? The other thing that I think is, I don't think that content in general that ends up being published should feel like AI. Like, that is, I think, a really damaging thing for a brand, especially right now, because people are very polarized on this tool. Best case scenario, they're a little bored because it sounds like everything else and their eyes skip right over what you're trying to say. Worst case scenario, they are mad because you have potentially given them something that they can't trust. So from my perspective, no content should ever be published that reads and feels like AI. How do you do that when you're using AI to create a first draft? From the way that I do that is I start with the prompt. I talk to it a lot about what I want the final product to look like before it goes and actually creates it. Once it's created, I read through it. There are some high level edits that I want to make. At that point, I can say, this feels a little bit too much of an attack to the target audience. I want them to feel convicted, but not offended. You can give it that kind of feedback, the kind of feedback that you would give a freelancer. Like, how would you have prompted a freelancer via an email, 2 years ago? You can use your AI like that. And then once it's changed those things, just double check, make sure it doesn't change anything significant. Sometimes it does. And you have to kind of say, why did you make this change? I didn't ask for this change. And then it will, okay, yeah, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I will fix this for you. And then it'll fix it for you. And then I go in and I have a checklist of things that I check for. That speech that AI tends to use, it feels like a TED talk. And that's kind of like high level. It feels like a TED talk. What does that mean? There's lots of stops and starts, lots of really inspirational language that, if you think about it for like 5 seconds, you're like, no one would actually say this. This is crazy. I'm writing a blog about tech hiring, so can't possibly be the most dramatic thing that has ever been seen. So you go in and you say, take away this dramatic language. A lot of times AI will ask a question and then answer the question. And it'll do this several times throughout the piece of content. And that is just a huge AI tell. I would take all of those out. I wouldn't keep any of them. M dashes, everyone knows M dashes. My kind of controversial hot take is I don't really care about dashes. It's just a grammatical point. Maybe everyone's accepting that things are made with AI now. So like we can kind of move on from M dashes because they do actually create a lot of consistency and they make things more concise. So that to me isn't bad writing. That's just grammar.
Like, I actually used to use undashes. So I'm glad you're saying this because for a minute I was like, do I have to start editing myself out? Because I actually use an undash.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just grammar. I mean, there's like always been forms and functions for how things are. Emojis. I hate emojis, but that might just be a personal taste thing. And I think that that's sometimes we should probably also step back and say, is this AI or is this just not my taste? In my case, as someone who's been a content writer for many years, like this is, and I think I can tell really quickly if something is AI. Emojis, those question and answers, the hugely inspirational language, those are the things that really just make me mad. Here's the thing. I say it, here's the thing now in my sleep because I read so many LinkedIn posts that have that exact thing. Like, just don't do it.
Yeah.
It annoys me. And soon enough, everybody else is going to be annoyed by that too. So just think about how you would have said that before it was written by AI.
I think it's great. I love that. Just very practical and a good pragmatic approach to help it feeling more human and to not losing sight of the fact that we're talking to humans. Right? Okay, so one quick question. When it comes to brand safety, consistency, checklists, like all of that, what is kind of your workflow now to try and keep things brand consistent? And where do you see AI and where do you have human checks?
So some of this is evolving, but I'm working on making sure that the team that I'm working with all has the same documents to start with. So the messaging
When
doc,
you say your team, do you mean your AI teammates or do
sorry,
you mean humans and AI?
my human and marketing team that is, I know they're all using AI on a daily basis. We have a very AI forward organization. So they're all using it. Everyone celebrates it. We're all giving each other tips and tricks because I'm responsible for gatekeeping the brand and making sure that it does not erode trust in the market. I'm working on making sure that the documents that everybody starts with. So that's like the messaging documents, the fact sheets, documents that talk about every specific topic that we could potentially have, all of our persona documents, just making sure that those are consistent and that they are readable for AI, that AI can, and making sure that people know what's for what. You can easily create a folder that says, this is for LinkedIn, this is for Instagram, this is for blogs, this is for decks, this is for whatever. And then it's just the same document, but controlled and organized in a way that a specific kind of AI would read and understand. And then making sure that the team knows how to use that. So that's because I know that they're writing their copy starting with AI. So I want them to start from a place that is aligning to some aspect of the brand. And that will drive consistency that way. And then when I'm reading it and checking, like I am checking to see if something is AI. It feels like overly AI to me. It's it's likely at that point that the person didn't review it very carefully. So then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to double check the numbers and make sure that the data shows up correctly as well. I think that I just, I feel very strongly that AI stealing writing erodes trust in the marketplace
Mhm.
because we all know that it lies. So if I didn't take the time to edit my copy to take out AI stealing writing, then did I also not check the facts or the numbers or whatever else? Then I can't trust it. The reader can't trust it, and it's potentially going to damage the brand.
Yeah, all great points. Okay, let's talk about you have been working on a really cool project where you're starting to rethink some of your key messaging and positioning around a really important topic for your business. So I'd love to hear kind of your process, how you approach that. I know you're using several AI tools to accomplish this. So if you can just kind of let's start from the beginning. What problem were you trying to solve?
Yeah, so we are working hard to make it so that our brand presents as a strong AI opportunity for our customers. We want to make sure that AI comes through in our messaging in a way that is exciting, but also true to what is actually happening in the marketplace. I work for a company called dice.com. We're a tech hiring marketplace. We are in the space of people who are looking for jobs in AI. We want to make sure that people know that we have AI tech professionals. We also want to make sure that the tech professionals know that we're giving them advice that will help them get a job in this kind of nebulous future of what's next now that AI is impacting all these workflows. So all of that needs to, at some way, come across in the messages that we're putting out. So the first thing I did was find everything we've already said about this topic. We've been saying stuff about this topic for 2 years at this point. So I gathered all those documents. I created a list of blog titles that we've created. We have thousands of blog titles. So this isn't something that I can just, and I didn't write most of them. So this is something I can just off the top of my head come up with. I wanted to make sure I knew what the blog titles were, how these blogs were organized on these topics, making sure that I can identify key themes that we had already, but also themes that we're missing. I also was working on those brand. I mentioned that I use the AI to ensure that we have brand consistency from the beginning and also the end of a process. So going through all of our different brand documents and making sure that this message comes through in the right way. And then I use Notebook LM specifically to go through some of the really important pieces that we've had. So internal thought leaders who've said things about AI, highly reviewed pieces that the whole organization has gotten behind, I've put into there. I've put in our brand messaging as well. And then that way I can go to Notebook LM anytime I see a message or I'm thinking about a message and just say, have we done this before? Are there any quotes that I could add to build the quality of this thing? The thought leader that is mostly represented in this body of work, how would they feel about this idea? Things like that to just sort of like give myself an opportunity to just double check my work. I have some other ideas too, but I think that that's where I've started. I think we have yet to see it impact how we're showing up in AI because a huge part of AI and content right now is making sure that we're showing up in when people ask questions about our brand, how do we show up? I've yet to see this work make an impact on that. I think it'll be a long tail of change, just like old SEO quality was. But that's kind of my end goal. Is if that happens, then I know that I've been successful.
That makes a ton of sense the way that you're approaching it. I am curious on the impact. So, I'm closely connected with you, so I kind of understand the world that you're operating in. And I know that it's changing rapidly, that there's really kind of a very finite amount of resources. Can you describe the difference between taking on this type of project with AI versus if you had tried to take this project on in your current circumstance without AI?
I don't think I would have had the audacity, if I'm being honest. I'm someone inexperienced and I have a lot of ideas, but those ideas are relatively untested. So one of the cool things about AI is that I can test them before I take them to somebody who I care about their opinion of me. I think the first one is like that would not have existed. So I think the amount of second guessing that I would have gone through over the course of this process of what did we really say this? How did we say this? Is this really what we meant? Or how much has this changed? I think a lot of that would have been, yeah. The other thing is, to be frank, we would have had a lot less content for me to go through if AI didn't exist. So it probably just would have been impossible. We've been using AI to amplify the content capability we have for almost a year and a half now. If that hadn't have happened, we would have had maybe a third of the content that we have. So there would have been less to go through. I also think that it would have required a lot more comments and Word documents and various different stakeholders reviewing and different opinions and people not having time and deadlines being pushed. People's time is the number one barrier in most organizations. Getting people to give you the initial information that you need to start a project and then getting them to review the project when it's been complete. And then there's several checkpoints in the process too, usually that, especially for something so important like the brand work, that you need to have people's point of view on. I could do all this in a week and then go back and change it with relatively little of my own personal time and work because I have a tool to do a lot of the actual hard work for me.
That makes so much sense. And something that you're saying is super aligned with one of the things that I'm hearing a lot from clients and leaders in the go to market space. The reality is that we've had a lot of limits that we've all been dealing with for a long time. Limits on capacity, limits on resources, limits on budget, limits on time. We just have a lot of limits. And all of us have, I mean, as long as I've been a working professional, been trying to figure out how to break through some of those limitations. And the fun thing that you just described is that for somebody who is willing to get scrappy and be a little bit adventurous, you figured out a way to break through some of those limitations when a year and a half ago, you maybe would have not even thought it could be possible. But now, today, you're like, I'm a little audacious. I love that. I can't wait to see what the impact of Baylee getting a little audacious is because I think it's going to be amazing. Okay, so Baylee, as we kind of get into the wrap up, this has been such a fun conversation just to hear your evolution and how you're thinking about, the future. Let's do a little bit of a rapid Q&A here. If you were giving advice to somebody just getting started, either in your role or somebody who's just experiencing AI for the first time, I have a few quick questions to ask you. If I were to ask you what the smallest high leverage workflow would be to pilot first, thinking about content, where would you suggest somebody start?
I would start with something that you were really good at, something that you feel like you could do in your sleep, and something that you're passionate about, something that you enjoy. You don't want to start with the boring thing that you hate, that you don't like reading about. You want to start with the thing that you kind of enjoy, that gets you a little bit fluttered, makes your heart go, oh, I get to do this thing now. So that's why I would start, because I think that that's going to put you in the mood to explore a little bit and test some things. I think if that's for you writing blogs, write a blog. If that's for you building a content calendar for the next few months, I personally hate that part. So that would be a good thing to offload and then go to something else that's a little bit more fun. A blank page is always going to be the hardest thing you face in a day. Like not knowing where to start, knowing what to say. What AI is going to do is it's going to give you a place to start. And even if you give it your worst possible idea and expect it to fail, you can tell it why you don't like what it gave you. You can't tell a blank page why you don't like a blank page. So, yeah.
Okay. Last one on this topic. If you are trying to figure out whether or not AI is worth it, what are some of the metrics that you're tracking in your adoption, whether it's time saved or output or how many revisions you have to do? How are you measuring whether or not it's getting better or whether or not it's worth it?
The number one thing for me is getting to the end of a day and feeling like I did good work. It's kind of a subjective thing to measure, but feeling like I'm excited to have people read the work that I did. If you use AI to create a product that you are excited about and that you are proud of, that to me is a metric of success, especially for content. I think a lot of us are kind of creators, artists to a certain extent at heart. And we come to it because we want to create things. And if it feels yucky to you, start somewhere else. Start with processes, start with planning, start with something that has to do with numbers. We know we all hate numbers. Do it there and then work your way into something that you are really proud of. But if you've successfully worked it into your process and you feel proud, like I think that to me is like you recognize that your human element into it played a role and you created something really good efficiently.
Okay, well, I have known you over the last couple of years, and so I've had a front row seat to seeing kind of the evolution of you as a practitioner as well as you in your role. And I can't help but think that your kind of set of what you're thinking about as the future of your role has to have changed over the last 2 years. So give me a little bit of perspective on what are you excited about in the future that you didn't expect to come about just because things have changed so much.
Content has always been an important part of marketing. I think now content is like the marketing thing. And I think that that's one of the things I'm most excited about is that I have been building a skill that is sustainable because it requires so much human gatekeeping of taste. AI is tasteless. It can't give you an opinion on whether or not it likes something or not. It can tell you whether or not something is good according to the metrics that you wanted it to check for, but it can't say this feels creative. This feels unique. That's the kind of stuff that a human is going to have to do. And that's the kind of stuff that I find fun. So I think content has kind of always been like, oh yeah, like write a blog, do this thing off to the side. But now we are how AI is perceiving your brand. We are how your brand engages with AI and the market that way. We are creativity shows itself and we kind of always have been, but now it's like an AI can quickly build an algorithm for how to decide where the ad should go. And we've had tools for that for a long time, but AI does not have a thing for does this cause people to feel emotional? And that's really, I think that's really what content is driving action from something that touches human beings. And so we can do so much more and try so many more things, but the actual crux of what content is going to be maintained its consistency.
Fantastic. Okay. Fast answers on 3 last questions. What are the top 3 AI tools that you're using on a daily basis?
Gemini, I would say Notebook LM, and then Perplexity for research.
Nice. I love Perplexity for research. One prompt that you can't live without.
Why did you do it this way? Tell me your thought process for creating it this way.
So asking it to explain itself to you. I love that. Most surprising limitation that you still run into.
Figuring out which chat I did what in.
Like organizing the actual content in the LLM. I'm with you. I'm like, oh geez, where did I do that thing? Yes. We need a way to unify all of the platforms and the content we created across them for sure. Well, Baylee, this has been such a fun conversation for me. As I alluded to, I've had this front row seat to seeing you evolve in the last couple of years. And I am not bashful to say that I think you have made a huge change from being a really talented content creator and producer into an excellent content strategist. And that's been a fun evolution for me to see. And I love your fearlessness in adopting these tools, but I also love your vulnerability in describing your journey and recognizing that this has been a human experience. It didn't happen overnight and it didn't come easy, but you were willing to be brave and jump in and do the work. And the outcome is really astounding. So thank you for sharing your journey with me.
Thank you, Carol-Lyn. Thanks. It really means a lot to hear you say that.
Thanks for listening to AI in Motion. If today's conversation sparked an idea, share it with your team or continue the conversation with us at Clarity in Motion Collective. We believe AI should give people and organizations clarity and momentum, not more noise. Until next time.